Hello and welcome to Pitt Resource Connection. I'm Mary Smith, your host, and we have Jim Hooker with us today. Welcome.
Good morning, Mary.
And in this role, you are now the coordinator for Community Feeding Our Children,
That
correct?
that is correct.
So you're out there trying to get these kids fed.
Yeah, and there's a whole story that goes with that, Mary, you bet. But that's the bottom line. We're trying to feed kids who are hungry.
So tell us what you know about the hunger in the U.S., the state, and even local here.
So hunger is a very old subject to our country. As long as our country has existed, we've been working on feeding the hungry. And it turns out as a mission, it's kind of a challenge because it's such an old issue. It's been around forever. People think that because we have things like the food bank and we have things like all these church ministries and the Joy Soup Kitchen in this town and all of those people are feeding, and they all are doing great work, and it's all true they're feeding. But it turns out that we still wind up having, when you look at the national numbers, Feeding America and the food bank, what you'd find is that 25 or 30% of our kids are still considered what they call food insecure. I describe it as hungry. And so in our county, about 2 years ago, I'm in a Kiwanis group I'm in, we decided to try to find out who was hungry, because we were supporting several organizations. One of them was Operation Sunshine down on 3rd Street. It was taking care of young women, and they were feeding them along the way. And
Right.
we went and talked to the gal who runs that operation. Her name is Barbara Davis, does just outstanding work there for the community and for these young gals. Mostly for single women and single parents who are single and they have young daughters.
Right.
And they were feeding them. So we wound up, the Kiwanis group I'm in, wound up making a donation to them to help them with what they were doing. Between that and I have a son-in-law who's a football coach at South Central High School. He came to us one day, not long after we moved here, and said, I've got some kids that are playing football that need food. And would you consider putting a box of food together for them? And so we did. Met the coach. Turned out that we wound up putting together my wife and I putting together 25 boxes of food for them on Easter and Christmas holidays, because these kids didn't have enough food to eat over the holidays. In the meantime, my wife got engaged with a thing called the Backpack Program at Covenant Church, where we're members, and that was feeding kids at school. And so I went in front of our Kiwanis group, and I'm talking about this. I'm saying, I wonder where all these hungry kids are and where they live. So, what are we really doing about this? That took us to the idea of understanding what hunger was going on in the country. We saw the numbers, Feeding America, 25 to 30% of children are hungry. By the way, it's much more prevalent for single women, much more prevalent in some of the racial minority groups. Black and Spanish folks have a more serious problem in that case. But it turns out it's very prevalent all across the country and in all the communities. Most prevalent, it turns out, in the state of North Carolina. We're ranked 8th out of all those states. And the county of North Carolina is ranked 10th out of 97 counties when it comes to the number of folks who are hungry in the community.
How can that be when you have all these resources like the food pantries and food
wonder?
stamps?
Well, the answer is very simple. The answer is that we don't identify who the hungry are. And so that was what our Kiwanis group decided to do. Let's go out and see if we can figure out who's hungry and where do they live. And it turns out we never answered the question about who's hungry and where they lived. The answer turned out to be in the school system. And the school system has this thing called the CEP program. It means the Free School Lunch Program. That school lunch program is a federally funded program, operates down through the school system. And that money comes down through the school system and provides food for children who apply to the school in terms of need to be fed. We have 14,000 children in Pitt County who are members, who are participating in that free school lunch program. 14,000.
That's a lot.
That's a whole lot. So armed with that information, we went out into the community and talked to all the churches we could find. We went to the school administrators, all the schools. We spent 2 years interviewing people. The folk that run the SNAP program, which is the old
food stamps.
The food stamp program. We went to all the people that run all these, all of the organizations that are basically operating to feed. And none of them were really identifying hunger. The SNAP program does have an application you have to apply for, so it's very similar to the free lunch program in schools, but no place could you find where these people live or who's hungry. Nobody, you could never get that information. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So we locked onto the schools and said, well, gee, if they know who the hungry kids are, how are the kids getting fed at school when they're not in school, which is Saturday and Sundays and holidays and the summers?
Right.
And it turned out the answer to that is a thing called a backpack program. So the backpack program operates as follows. We have churches who have engaged with the school in their community. People go to church. They learn that their children are hungry in school. They connect to the school. And that connection enables them to understand, one, that the school needs help with feeding the kids, and two, how to do it. And the answer is they put packages of food together every Friday or Thursday, and they hand them to the social worker or the guidance counselor at the school, and the school who has identified the kids who need those backpacks will hand them to the kids every Friday, and they take them home on weekends. And that's how they get their food on weekends.
What kind of food is it typically?
It's typically, it varies obviously because every church and every school, they all do it differently.
Right.
But there's been a great deal of effort in recent years to understand the nutritional value of food. And so for the most part, you'll find in there nutrition-oriented foods. There's always going to be milk. There's always going to be protein. There's always going to be a fruit. It has to be something that's durable, shelf-worthy.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be able to last, that kind of thing. So generally speaking, it's food that's going to allow them to get food for a weekend. The thing that I happen to really like about it, and that our group liked about it, is what made this charity so extraordinarily special, having worked on charities a good part of my life, was this is the only charity I knew about where you could throw $1 into the bag, and $1 of that went into food that was handed into somebody who was hungry. That was about as good as it's going to get for a charity.
Yeah, that's right.
Mary, you and I know charities really well.
Yeah.
And you know that it takes anywhere from 10 to 30% to run a real good charity. This charity operates with no cost, except the cost of the food that goes into the bag, because all the rest of it's volunteer. The church, all the people that go to church are volunteers. The school system is all already prepaid by the, so it's an opportunity to make a difference in an area that is really significant. Now, let me go back for just a minute and talk about why hunger is such a significant problem for our community. So persistent hunger undermines the fabric of our community. And why does it do that? Well, those who are persistently hunger wind up to being in a what I describe it as hopeless. They get in a state where they're basically hopeless. Mm-hmm. And that resides primarily in the fact that if they're hungry, they feel like people don't care about them.
Right.
Because they don't have any food. And that leads them to thinking their self-worth they're not worth much.
Right.
That leads to hopelessness. And hopelessness is what really undermines the fabric of our community. That's what leads us to much of the lawlessness that takes place in our community, much of the drugs, much of the other problems that we have. And especially in schools, it leads to children not being able to learn. Mm-hmm. When they go to school and they're hungry, you can't learn if you're hungry.
No. Many
of them just put their heads in the desk. When you go to talk to teachers who are hungry kids, they know who they are exactly. Because the kids are not paying attention, they're not able to focus. Mm-hmm. So hunger is a really difficult problem for us in our community because it's been around a long time and people don't think there's anything that can be done about it, or there's a lot being done about it, and how could there still be people still be hungry? Year after year, the number remains the same. 25% of our children are hungry in this community. So that motivated us to try to figure out how to do something about it.
Right.
That gets us to this program, Community Feeding Our Children. So we decided that if this is about churches and schools, if the federal government is not feeding hungry, they're not identifying them other than through schools and the school lunch program. And if the city and the county are not doing anything about it otherwise, and by the way, they have a summer meals program you might be familiar with, but otherwise they don't engage this problem. So we don't really know. The city doesn't engage it at all. The county just has a summer meals program.
Right.
So we said, well, if the answer is in the churches, isn't that maybe a great place for it to be? Mm-hmm. Let's get more churches involved and let's see if we can get churches connected to the schools where we have kids who are hungry and do something about that.
Right.
And that was the birth of the Community Feeding Our Children program.
And when did that happen?
That happened in November last year
November.
as a result of work that was done over a couple of years, and because of large part because of the leadership that Pastor Rodney Coles had showed in this area. He's been working on feeding the community now for about 9 years here.
Something like that, yeah.
And I connected with him along the way, or we did, along with him a couple of years ago. And under his leadership, we've developed this whole, nurtured this whole idea. We've learned a lot about how to work with schools. We've spent a lot of time talking to people like Travis Lewis, who's the head of student affairs for the whole school system, works for Dr. Lenker, and a number of principals and a number of guidance counselors. Cassandra Campbell, who is the head guidance counselor for the school system.
Right.
And all of her folks, we've been in and talked to all of them. And we're just getting ourselves educated on what it is and how to do something about it. And the answer turns out to be it's very simple. It's this backpack program in churches who have access to the schools, and the churches and the schools are comfortable with working with each other because of who they are and because of what they bring to the community. And so what we decided to do is let's make a program out of this. Let's keep track of everything that goes on in the program, and let's see what we can do about that. We have 37 schools. We have about 19 churches now that are doing backpack programs. We just added another one a week ago.
So did they get assigned to a particular school to work with? Or?
Actually, the way they do it is they've tended to know what school they're in. For example, just one example, St. James is right next to Walcoats. They're physically within 500 yards of each other. And so the people that go to St. James Church knew Walcoats had kids that were hungry. They started a backpack program on their own years ago. And they're feeding about 80 kids there every single week with the backpack program. Well, the big numbers are this. We have 14,000 children in the community who are hungry, if you believe that federal program. We have about 400 that were being fed with backpacks when we started this program 2 years ago. We doubled it a year. We were doing 800 at the end of the school year last year. We're trying to get to 1,600 this year.
Wow.
We're about at 1,000 now, or 1,100. And so, so we have what we have now figured out is we have a structured program. We know how to feed these kids who are hungry, and we have a special opportunity to really do something about it. The reason we created the program is so that the community can know, one, that hunger is a prevailing problem in our community, that two, it still exists and it still is undermining the fabric of our community,
Right.
and three, we have the means now to do something about it.
Awesome.
We actually can make a difference. And that's the exciting part of it. We can make a difference, and making the difference part is not a lot of money. It's a commitment of people to the concept that we can make a difference with feeding hungry kids, and being able to actually get engaged with the school system.
And a question that automatically comes to mind, I know it's not a prepared question, so you may not, you're very well educated, so you probably do know the answer, but it's, how are you all setting up to measure the outcome of your, can you measure that this has actually had an impact on these children?
So the answer to that lies in how do we decide who's hungry? And the answer to that lies in what I said right at the very beginning. We don't know who the hungry are. The school system knows who they are. So here's how we figure out how the outcome is. The outcome is based on the number of these hungry kids that we feed. Now, how do we know that they're really hungry and that they're really getting fed? Well, there's two parts to that answer. The first part is that the teachers in the school system are the ones who are actually saying which kids are going to get the bags.
Right.
So, for example, I went to Belvoir School a year ago, and they had 30 bags. They have 440 kids. Every one of them is on the school lunch program in Belvoir.
Wow.
All 440 kids. 30 of them were getting backpacks. I said to the guidance counselor there, well, how do you decide who's going to get the bags? If there's 400 kids here who are hungry and you only got 30 bags. She said, well, the teachers make that decision. And I sat back and looked at that and thought, what a horrible thing that is. You got a teacher who's supposed to be educating them, who looks out into a room full of kids who are probably all hungry, and picks out 5 out of 40 that she's going to give bags to.
Hey, Joe, it's your lucky day.
Yeah, there you go, right? I mean, so that was about as much motivation as I needed to deal with it. But the answer to your question really lies in the fact that we know it's effective because the teachers are the ones who know who the hungry kids are, and they're the ones that are identifying the kids get the bags.
And they see the difference.
And they see the difference.
Right.
And we probably are never really going to know. It's so true of so much of God's work that's the way it really is. I mean, that's how grace works, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, grace shows up, and it showed up in me. It shows up in everybody when He chooses to have it show up. And we don't know the effect of what we might have on somebody else because of what we're doing in our lives. But that's just the way it is.
So I think you've got us energized.
Yeah.
We got the troops ready.
Yeah.
Okay. So the community out here has a lot at their disposal. It doesn't take a lot to put the backpack together. Average cost for a weekend would be?
Well, an average cost of a bag now, we have several really low-cost programs. You can get a bag put together for about $1. So if you want to feed 80 kids, you're talking about $80 a weekend times 52 weeks. That's what the program might cost you a year. Half of that, say if you did 40 kids. It's not a lot of money that drives this program. It's the commitment to start it and to stay with it.
Right.
What we don't want to do is start feeding kids and then stop.
Stop it. Yeah.
So we need churches who are committed. We need people who are committed to doing the program. And the finances really, the finances have not been a problem so far. We need the money, but it hasn't been a problem.
If the individual listening to this doesn't have a group to get together and do backpacks, for instance, but they would like to donate to this cause, where would they donate? Okay,
so there's a couple of things that the community members can do. First of all, we have a website. The website is CFOC2017.org. It's on the screen there.
Okay.
If you go to that website, you're going to find all the information you need to know in this program. You'll find our mission, which basically is described as dealing with children's hunger, especially at times when the hunger is most prevalent. That's the mission statement. So, but if you go on there, you can find a way to donate money.
Okay.
We're uploading the website. It's not exactly where we want it to be yet, but there will be a way, for example, to identify yourself as a volunteer. Most importantly, on that website, you can find the listing of every single school and every single church that is supporting that school and the schools that don't have any support. So all 37, there's a listing of all 37 schools.
Right.
The churches that are supporting, the number of bags that are being provided through that church to that school. So you can join an existing church program.
Okay.
If you want to do that. Just by going on there and finding what church it is. Maybe your church is supporting it and you didn't know it.
Right.
That's one way to do it. You can donate money. You can donate your time to that church and help them do the backpacks.
There's got to be somebody putting these
Somebody's
bags.
got to put the bags together. You have to buy the food. You have to store it in a shelf. It has to be taken down once a week, put into a bag, and delivered to the school. So there's logistics. And as a matter of fact, the logistics is the major part of the program if you're running one of these programs. And the beautiful part of it is that every single week you get a chance to feed a kid who wouldn't get any food otherwise.
And that makes you feel good.
So let me give you the second half of the answer to the question you asked earlier about how do you know how this really works. It's like any other charity, Mary, and you know charities like I do. We never really know exactly whether what we've done in a charity has actually hit the target completely. So when you hand food to a hungry child, you can't really be sure that he's going to get that food. And actually, we know that he doesn't always get it. Sometimes it gets taken away from him on a bus on the way home. Sometimes it goes home and the parents use it for some other purpose other than feeding him. Maybe they feed themselves. Maybe they feed another child. Whatever might be the case. But I go back to what I said earlier about that. The most incredible about this charity is, you'll never have a better opportunity to put the dollar for dollar to put your money into the hands of somebody who you know needs that than this opportunity right here. It's the most special opportunity I've ever been exposed to in my life. It's incredible. Dollar for dollar, not a single penny goes to some other cost, to some other purpose, some other administration, some other anything.
Everything's
goes right
volunteer.
into the food, goes right into a child's hand.
Here you go.
Yeah, so it's just really special that way.
Where do you get your backpacks?
So the backpacks turned out to be big. You know what a grocery bag looks like when you come out of a grocery bag? That's what they do them in. They put them in now.
I got you. So it's not an actual backpack.
No, they got the name backpack because the kid they were originally putting it in. It's a national program, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
They were putting it in backpacks, but then the food in the backpacks the kids would lose the backpacks, or they would get old, or they would get dirty, or whatever. You want to put food in them. So now we just put them in these plastic grocery bags.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
and they just walk around with all those bags.
All right, so people
They
don't
take
have
a
to
bag-
buy. Yeah,
They take a bag and they typically put it in their backpack.
gotcha.
Most of them.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
So we have a great opportunity to make a difference here. 14,000 versus 1,000 kids that are getting it right now today. The numbers are staggering.
So the website is CFOC 2017.org.
Yep.
It stands for Community Feeding Our Children.
Community feeding our children.
And if anybody has more information they'd like to get from you, your information's on the screen.
You
They can
bet.
give you a call or email you, and you can really kind of direct them back to the website and how to get involved.
Well, I can do more than that. If they actually really want to find out who somebody is working on that, you can find that list on the website, or I can tell you. If you tell me where you are and who you are in the community and what church you're going to, whether or not you've got somebody that has an active program. I have talked to maybe 10 or 15 pastors who don't have programs yet, partly through the Interfaith Clergy Group, Pastor Cole's organization. We've had 3 different churches now start programs in the last year.
That's great.
Yeah, Pastor Bob Hudak and St. Paul's Episcopal Church being the last one. He just picked up Sadie Salter School in the last week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we know that the information, if you get it out there, this community has a great heart.
Yes, it does.
This is a great Christian community, right? Mm-hmm. We know that's the reason we created the program. We know if people understand this and they can get involved and engaged, they will get engaged, and this thing can be done. We can make a huge difference here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for
Thank
coming
you,
in and appreciate the work that you do in our community.
Thank you so
You
much.
work very, very hard. I know that.
Yeah. Well, it's God's work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having
Okay.
us. We really appreciate being with you today.
Awesome. And we want to thank you all for tuning in and watching the Pitt Resource Connection, and hope you have a good day.